Welcome to Born or Made, the podcast that dives deep into the heart of success and identity. Are the traits that define us as leaders ingrained from birth, or are they carved out throughout our experiences? Join your host, Anne-Marie LaTulip, as we ask these questions to some of the most insightful and inspiring entrepreneurs of our time. Each episode, we explore their journeys, the decisions that shaped them, and how they've molded their own paths to success. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply curious about the interplay between nature and nurture in professional growth, you're in the right place. Get ready for compelling stories, transformative insights, and a new perspective on what it really takes to make it in the world of entrepreneurship.
Hello, welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. I am your host, Anne-Marie LaTulip, and with me today, I am so excited to have the lovely Sharon Hess with us, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. After a highly successful 40-plus year business career that included building more than one multi-million-dollar business from the ground up, Sharon now combines over 30 years studying and teaching spiritual principles with her practical business and life know-how on how to help her clients integrate their divine inner wisdom with their work, business, and relationships. Sharon, I am so thrilled to have you here today.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
And so I just read a little bit about what you're doing, and it's really some interesting stuff that I'm sure not a lot of people might even know exists. So if you could take a minute and talk about a little bit about your journey and how you ended up from multi-million-dollar businesses to sort of the spiritual realm, and how that all came to be.
So it's kind of interesting because, excuse me, when I became successful in business, it was actually because of my spiritual journey, but I never connected the two. We kind of think our practical stuff is one thing and our spiritual journey is another, right? And I love how the universe guides us in certain directions. When I had left I guess I would say, typical business that I was in, I decided to kind of like look around for other things. And I actually was on a phone call, and I'll never forget this. I was sitting there and I did this phone call. It was called, Rapid Rescue, when it was during the recession. And I'm listening to this phone call, and this guy starts going into spiritual stuff with the person he was coaching. And my brain went, wait a minute, people do this and use the two things together? How novel is that?
Wow.
And that kind of started my journey towards combining both the spiritual and the practical so that we could be more successful in our everyday life. And then after that, I started studying even more spiritual things. And I ended up learning how to read the Akashic records and go in and look at soul stories. And the funny thing is, I always tell people 10 years ago, I would have thought it was a whack job. I would have said, oh, this woman's, totally nuts. What is she talking about? My soul has a, matrix and, yada, yada, yada. So I actually wrote a spiritual sales process. I combined the spiritual and the practical to kind of teach particularly people who struggle with adding that spirituality into their business, or, like solopreneurs particularly are generally very loving, giving, heart-warm people, but they try to do all this, I'll call it like icky marketing and sales stuff. And it goes against their brain. And because everything is energy in this world, when you do that, it comes across some way, shape, or form. When I first started my spiritual business, I really thought I was going to be a sales coach. And that's when I started looking at that stuff. And then when I learned how to go into the records, the Akashic records, which, by the way, I'll explain. Do you want me to stop and kind of explain that?
Yeah.
briefly?
So let's pause for a minute, because I have so many questions on already what you've just said. So yes, I definitely want to know about that. I'm very, very curious, but I want to just for a minute before we go forward, I want to kind of go back and ask you about your journey into growing multi-million-dollar businesses, and what sort of businesses were they like prior to finding?
It was print and mail. It was print and mail.
Oh, okay.
It was totally, yeah. And yeah, so um I actually sold, I'm laughing, but the person that I met that got me into this, I actually met him at a Course in Miracles meeting. Okay. And A Course in Miracles was the beginning of my spiritual journey. And
Okay.
I loved it so much and it resonated so much with me. When I opened the book and looked at it, and this is all going to tie together, just bear with me for a
No,
minute.
no, I love
Uh,
it.
yeah. So I actually, when I opened the book, what happened was the person that I worked for, this is interesting. I worked for a commercial collection agency. You would think spirituality and collections, what the
Like the
hell? That doesn't
opposite.
connect, right? But it all connects, right? So he came to me and we were good friends, and he said a friend of mine's going to be out of town and I'm going to facilitate his Course in Miracles class. Would you come and be at the class so that somebody there that I know? And I said, sure, I'll do that. And then I started thinking, I don't know what the hell that is, right? So I had an older brother who was, I'll call a seeker. He did he went to Young Society, Quaker meetings, Methodist Church, Buddhist. I mean, he studied it all, right? So I called him and I said, Ron, um, so uh, my boss asked me to go to this thing with him, A Course in Miracles. I said, what did I get myself into? You know, all this weird stuff. And he said, oh, I bought the book and I never did anything with it. He said, I'll go with you. So the great thing about that is then Ron and I, while he was still alive, he's since passed away, but we had really many deep conversations about A Course in Miracles. So anyway, they asked me to facilitate my own class. This is a little further down the line. And that's where I met the man who gave me the sales job selling newspaper inserts. And that was the first sales job that I would say was really successful, that I started selling $1 million. And I was like Rookie of the Year. And it was like, I was just always their top salesperson. And from that, I met people who were doing automotive newspaper inserts. And I went with them and I said, listen, you're doing enough of this. Why don't you just do your own mail business? And that's when we started the print and mail business.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah. So it just it's interesting how, when we put one foot in front of the other, we never know where that path is going to lead us.
No.
And lo and behold, that's what happened with me.
Yeah, it's kind of like just grab the hand, follow, just follow where it takes you, like
Exactly. It's since I've learned as much as I've learned, and I've gotten as far as I have in life, I realize that a lot of things we think we're in control of, we just aren't.
Yeah.
So we create, and it's one of my favorite articles I ever wrote is struggle is optional. And it's true. We create all of this struggle within ourselves, and it's just not the truth of us at all. And if we would just relax and just let the universe guide us and be good with it and just kind of like follow that flow, that's when things work.
That's such a great message. It really is. So many people need to hear that or listen to that kind of thing.
Right.
When you were younger, were you always were you brought up in a spiritual household or
No,
religious household?
not at all.
No, okay.
I'm laughing. No, no. So my mother was from Belgium, and she was raised Catholic. And when she married my dad, who was not Catholic, she was 17 years old. And she came here. She was a war bride. My dad was an American soldier.
Oh,
They met during World War II. And she came here to America. And she believed, it's interesting, and I'll just want to say this, everybody listen to this. It doesn't matter if something's true or not. If you believe it, it's true for you. Okay. So my mom believed that she was excommunicated from the Catholic Church because she married a non-Catholic, which there was a point in time when that was true,
yeah.
So my dad, on the other hand, my grandmother married a evangelistic tent preacher, and that totally turned my dad against religion. And he really just, I don't know what he believed. So I ended up, what I would do though, is I was always kind of fascinated with it. So I would go to church with friends. So I went to many different churches. I went to Lutheran, Baptist, Methodist, So I got a pretty good all-round view of spirituality and what people believed and why they believed it. And then when I met my husband, he was Catholic and he had a uncle who was an abbot. And so I thought that I needed to become Catholic. I did. So I was like 19 years old and I went to instructions and I got baptized as a Catholic. I never was a practicing Catholic, though, I will just say that. And then after we were married and I learned more, he just really, he wasn't practicing Catholic. And there's a lot of things that he didn't believe. And, you know, it's tough because a lot of times if we do have a staunch religious upbringing, it turns us against religion.
Mhm.
And I went and listened to one speaker one time and he said the words, the God of our childhood. And I realized what that means to a lot of people, you know, because they're taught. I never understood. I was always, I would hear, oh, God loves you. But if you're bad, you're going to hell. And
Yeah, right.
I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't compute, doesn't make sense. So my belief and what I've learned through A Course in Miracles, which is what everything I teach is based on, God is just total unconditional love energy that extended itself and created all that is.
Yeah.
So God to me is the creator of all that is, and that love energy.
I love that so much because so many, like you said, so many kids are painted this mean picture of God. If you sin, you know, that's so.
Now, there's not some big dude hanging up on a cloud, you know, pointing out what you do right and wrong. You know, it just
right.
You know, just doesn't
Right.
make sense. And I also believe that heaven and hell is right here and now, and that we experience it based on what we believe and how we act.
That's really interesting. Okay, so I want to talk more now. Now that we kind of heard the backstory, I want to move a little bit forward and talk about. First off, you wrote this book, which is great. So if you want to talk about that, I'd love to hear it. But I also really
Sure.
want to hear about this Akashic. Is that how you say it? And
Yeah,
soul
Akashic
story.
records. Yeah,
I can't wait
it's
to
just
hear
the
all.
field of consciousness. But where's my? Oh, sorry about that. I hope I look okay from the side.
Yes, you're fine.
But anyway, so the book is basically little snippets,
Okay.
little thoughts. And the idea behind it is when you're struggling with something, there's a prayer in the front you can say, or if you have your own thing, just do that. And then you open the book, and where your eyes fall, it tells you what you need to hear at that moment. And so it's basically messages from your higher self, your divine self,
Okay.
the part of you that remembers you're connected to God. Okay. And interestingly enough, my brother Ron, who's no longer with us, edited the book. And there's a really cool story. It's kind of brief, but I'll share it with you.
Yeah.
We have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So Ron was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and he had a huge tumor in his esophagus. And so he was in the nursing home, and I thought he didn't have long to live, and we knew this. And we had wonderful discussions. He taught me death with grace, which was a beautiful thing. And because of that background we had together of studying spirituality and A Course in Miracles, we really talked about all of it, you know, and it was so beautiful. But anyway, he had edited this book. I had it for a while, and I just couldn't seem to pull it together. And I didn't understand why, because I said, you know, I've created $1 million businesses. I understand what I'm doing. I know all this. I just couldn't do it. So when he was diagnosed, I thought, oh my God, I better get the book because I want him to see it and hold it in his hands before he dies.
Yeah.
So I did. And interestingly enough, he got the book like the day before he went in the hospital to pass away, basically. So it was kind of cool for me. So what I did was I released it on the day that I did his celebration of life. And it did hit #1 new release and #1 bestseller that day.
Oh
So
my goodness.
attribute that to him. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool story for me.
Yeah, that is. What a story. Now, when you say your higher self, I want to touch on this for a minute because I don't know if I do you know who Sylvia Brown is?
Yeah.
Okay, you've heard her before. Okay. So she talks about, and I kind of want to hear if this is what you were saying about the part of you that knows you're still connected to God.
Okay.
She talks about that you can have memories of your life before you came to Earth, that you sort of plan out your journey and what you're here to accomplish. And then when you have sort of deja vu or those odd senses that you've been there before, that it's your higher self connecting or remembering life on the other side, she calls it. Is that
okay?
similar?
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm going to do Course in Miracles terminology here.
Yeah, please.
So remember, I told you that, that. Where should I start? Let me think. Okay. So God is total unconditional love energy, right? Extended itself and created the sonship and all that is that we're a part of. But I love this terminology. Course in Miracles says, in a tiny mad instant, we took ourselves seriously and thought that we separated from God. So in that moment, God gave us the answer, which is the Holy Spirit, higher self, whatever you want to call it. There's a part of you that remembers you're connected to God, even though you're here in this body on earth. Okay.
Right.
Now, when that happened, when we thought that we separated from God, I don't know if you've heard the terminology about the world of duality or dual mind and whatever.
No.
So what that means is we have a split mind, not Freudian, not like you're schizophrenic or anything.
Yeah.
There's a part of our mind through our higher self, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, that remembers we're connected to God. I call it our divine self, because that just makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's our ego mind, or ego self, a little different from Freudian meaning of ego. The ego self doesn't remember you're connected to anyone or anything else. You think, this is it, this is me, I'm all alone, I'm this, and this is it, and done. So the miracle actually in A Course in Miracles is when you shift from that ego mind into your divine self. And then you have like a whole world of possibilities because you're connected.
Wow.
Okay. Did I answer your question, Will? Or did that give you more questions? It might have given
No.
you more questions.
No, yeah, actually, yeah. You did give me one more question. And what is that process? When you take somebody on, I'm guessing that's what you do, is you take people on this process.
You learn how to do that for yourself. And that's why you study A Course in Miracles or any spiritual paths, any spiritual study. But so the Akashic Records, by the way,
Yeah.
is a field of consciousness. Some people call it like the Book of Life, whatever, but it really is just, like a history of your soul, where it's been, what it's done, So to correlate A Course in Miracles and soul stories and Akashic Records together, it's interesting because I've been thinking about that, and I think I'm going to probably do a class on it because it's fascinating to me. So, A Course in Miracles teaches that all healing is at the mind level, because your ego mind and your divine self are in your mind, and that's what we operate on. Correct? I mean, it's consciousness.
Yes.
Whatever we're conscious of is how we operate. And there's our subconscious mind, our conscious mind, what we're consciously aware of. And then there's other levels of consciousness. But I always say, if you connect to your God consciousness, it trumps everything else. Doesn't matter what your subconscious mind thinks. Doesn't matter what your conscious mind thinks. If you're operating from that divine mind,
right,
then everything's going to work, right? So, because A Course in Miracles teaches that all healing is at the mind level, and the Akashic Records is actually going into a field of consciousness, it makes sense to me that it's the two work together, because it's actually looking at consciousness. Now, what I do, by the way, when I go into someone and do someone's soul story, I look at a couple of things. I look at what their soul matrix is made up of, because our soul, like you said, has an idea when it comes in. But when our soul is created by God, it has certain ways that it likes to create abundance. And we all love to know, how can I create abundance, right? So if you do it knowing your soul level gifts, it's a lot easier. Okay. That's one thing. But then I have Akashic Record guides. And I asked them, show me the story that will tell me what they're energetically dealing with healing in this moment. Because everything from our soul is about healing and remembering that we're connected to God's self, right?
Yeah.
So your soul story, it doesn't, it doesn't matter a flip that you were a waitress in, England 100 years ago. That doesn't matter. What matters is what was going on energetically that you're either recreating in the here and now, which we do that. We recreate patterns. We all know that we create patterns in our everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Do the same thing on a soul level, right? So it's just a matter of looking at what is it that we're dealing with in this moment that we can shift and change. And that's what healing's all about.
Yeah. Interesting. So do you believe that our soul has multiple times here on the present earth?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always believe, a lot of people just call it reincarnation, but I always believed in one of the first things I ever read. It was a great little book, and it was called I think it was Audrey Rose, or For Love of Audrey Rose, and it was about a little girl who was obviously reincarnated and kept having an experience from that. Now, that would be kind of like a bleed through of energy and remembrance. We don't remember our past lives when we come into this time-space reality, what we're experiencing in the here now. Because if we did, then we wouldn't be able to create the scenarios that we need in order to elicit our healing.
Interesting. That is so, I could talk about this for hours. That's so interesting. So
I've seen some fascinating stories, let me tell you.
I
I
bet
just
you,
that part of my work.
I bet
It is
you have.
fascinating.
So every time we come here, do you believe it's to improve our higher self in addition to healing, or to learn some sort of
Well, your higher self, when you're connected to God, there's nothing to improve, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Think about it. But I think that there's what we come here to. All right. So if this is kind of high level, but if you consider that we are all part of the same soul, right?
Mhm.
Remember, God extended itself. Now, God can't experience what we're experiencing, right? Because
Right.
God's not the body. It's
Right.
just that unconditional love energy. So in order to expand and become more of that unconditional love energy, that's what we're all here to do, is to help the whole heal and eventually remember that we are all still connected to the creator.
I gotcha. Okay. Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, fascinating. It really
Yeah.
is. So now I want to ask you about something else I read, that you're also a certified natural healer.
Correct. Well, that's because I'm a Reiki master.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And
So
what I did was, so this is kind of interesting. So I paint angels. I don't know if you looked at my website,
I
but
did. That was my
paint-
next thing I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
about.
Okay. Well, it kind of all falls in one.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, the first time I painted an angel, I was waking up one morning, and I got the message to paint this angel. And I was even given the image and how to do it and what I should do, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't paint, I'm not a painter, but my brother happens to have a degree in fine arts. So I called him, I said, I need to paint this angel and I need your help. So he came over and he helped me, he showed me how to do paint and brush and all that kind of stuff. Now, what I do is not fine art by any means. It's actually, I mean, they're not bad looking images, but it's actually the energy within the image. Okay.
Okay.
So I painted one and I saw this little dot and I thought, wait a minute, that's a color I didn't use. And I took a picture of it and I enlarged it. And it was actually a dog's head. And so then it was for a friend. And then when I sent it to her, she sent me a picture of her with her dog when she was little, and it looked like that dog. Now there's other images. So then I started discovering there's images in these angels that I don't paint, if that makes sense. But there can be it's whatever it means to the person. It's the energy behind it. But I mean, there can be all kinds of things. One had a picture, it looked like somebody took an ink pen and drew a gnome, so
Really?
it's just a fascinating thing to me. So anyway, so I'm painting these angels and I thought, excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of water.
Yeah, please.
So I thought, well, I am toting that it's about the energy. And when I sit and I paint, I basically do prayer work and then I just kind of like turn my hands over to whatever. And I've got, my guides, but whatever you call it. I mean, some people call it different things or they just, their gut instinct, whatever. So anyway, so I just go with it. And I started thinking, well, if I'm telling people that I'm doing this with energy, I've always been interested, what is Reiki all about? Because I just do natural energy healing stuff, right? So I went and I got certified as a Reiki master and certified natural healer.
Okay.
So it was kind of like painting the angels led me down that path.
Led you, yeah. All right, so I want to talk about Reiki, but first I want to go back and ask you, you've mentioned a couple of times your guides and how you follow your guides. So do you believe that we have more than one, say, guardian angel?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So angels and guides are kind of two different things.
Okay.
Angels are beings that were created by God. They're not dead babies, trust me.
Right. They're not human. They were never human.
It just drives me crazy when people go, oh, I got another angel. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So angels, and if you read the Bible, I'm not a Bible scholar, okay, but any religion will tell you and talks about angels, and they are a specific being, light, Light, being created by God.
Right.
Okay. And a guide is actually a soul that did experience life on earth
and pass.
So so your guides understand kind of how do I want to say this, the meshing of the two, your divine self and your earthly self. However, there are certain I'll say rules to the road, like they cannot force you to do anything. We have free will, right? So they can guide you is what they can do. And the guidance is by what you ask and what you seek. Old saying, seek and you shall find. Well, that's why I did the book, Spiritual Spice, because inside it's guidance. And sometimes we can't see our own stuff.
Right. Because
we create our stuff. We love it. Even if it's a pile of poop, we love it because we created it, right?
Yeah.
So we need other people to help us see that. Sometimes it might be somebody here on earth, and sometimes it might be someone from above.
Do you think that it's ever relatives that have passed on?
It's ever relative what?
If your guide could be a relative that has passed on? Or is it?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. Sometimes you can get messages from deceased relatives as well. Your ancestors are always there. And another gift I do have is mediumship, which is talking to people on the other side. I don't like doing it. It's not we all have gifts and gigs, but I have experienced it.
Wow.
And if an ancestor comes in to give a message to another person, I'm fine with that. I'll more than gladly do that, but I'm not like a stage medium, like people who actually get on stage and read the room, or like a Teresa Caputa or something like that. That's not what I do. But yeah. So when you start down your spiritual path, you start discovering all kinds of cool things you didn't know about or didn't know were there before.
Yeah, it's just so cool.
And it's all relative to living a happy, peaceful life. Right? Your life becomes a masterpiece when you learn to master peace. And the interesting thing is, in business, this is all relative. This all is a part of it.
Yeah, and I want to hear about that, the combination that you take between these two. But first, for anyone listening that might not have any idea at all what Reiki is, can you just talk about it real quick for a little bit about what?
Yeah, Reiki is just energy, and the guy who discovered it went into on a trance. He what do you call it when you don't eat forever? What do you call it? Fasting? He went into
Fasting, yeah.
fasting. And when he came out of the fasting, like on whatever certain day, and you can look this up, his name was Yusui. But he was given these symbols, and the symbols, Reiki is specific symbols that just literally move energy, shift and change energy. And one of the first things you're taught, and anyone can do this, is rub your hands and then do this and see if you can feel energy. We all have that ability.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you feel it?
Yeah, I could feel a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a little kind of tingling, kind of sort of feels like something's there or whatever.
Yeah, like a little
and then you can
yeah.
expand it and you can play with it. But when you do specific symbols to move the energy, that's what Reiki is.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And it's all about intention. Everything in this world, you'll find is about intention.
Yeah.
What is your intention for it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So now I want to hear the name of the podcast here. Let's touch on this for a minute. Is Born or Made, right? Are we born with our entrepreneurial drive, or is it evolve over time based on decisions and things like that? So
both.
Yeah, speaking to you, it sounds like, yeah, a little bit of both. That's what I was going to say.
Well, it is both. It is both. And it's interesting because I'll never forget, I wrote this thing one time about your DNA is not your destiny. And where I got that idea from, the world's always teaching us things if we just pay attention. I was watching this TV show, and it was where a guy got arrested for murder because his DNA was at the crime scene. But it was a drug deal. And he didn't do drugs, and he didn't know what this had. Anyway, as it come to find out, it was actually, what do you call it, familia DNA. He found out he had a twin brother that he didn't know he had. Okay.
Wow.
This man had become, he was like, I don't know, like a successful, I'm going to make it up because I don't remember, like a successful banker, wife, kids, the whole American dream kind of thing. The twin brother was a drug addict.
Wow.
So I thought about that, and I thought, exact same DNA, right? So
Yeah.
it's not, so it is, there's the whole idea behind, is it nature or nurture?
Right.
And I think it's a little bit of both, because I think our DNA, or our upbringing, whatever, that it can nurture our gifts or it can squash them.
Yeah, that's so true. And
so we are responsible, never free will, right?
Yeah.
So we do have specific soul level gifts, all right? When I discovered all of this and studied the Akashic records and everything. So my soul is all about creating in the physical, right? Which would be abundance, money, things, whatever. A book, it's creating art, it's creating, right? But I also have a secondary, which is healer, which is about healing. So those two combined make me who I am. And I always say, whatever your soul level gifts or your purpose that you came here for, because I do believe we all have some kind of idea when we come here of what we want to accomplish.
Yes. Yeah.
In this lifetime, right? But I always say your gifts never change, your purpose never changes, but the way you bring it to the world does.
Wow.
So a lot of times people think, oh, I'm just flaky. I do this, and then I want to do something else, and I do that. But it's not that you're flaky. It's that's how you're discovering and discerning who you are and what you want to be and what you want to leave behind in this world.
Wow. That is so cool. I love that. So talk a little bit about how because that's what you do. You coach entrepreneurs on how to combine their spiritual with their business. Yes?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about that process, especially for somebody that may be really closed up spiritually, and what that's like to connect the two?
Okay. Well, the first thing I do is look at your soul story and what's going on, so we know what you're actually dealing with in this moment from a soul level. right? And I look at your soul gifts, how your soul likes to create. Then because I have this enormous library of business stuff, as well as the library of spiritual stuff, it's all individualized. Nothing's cookie cutter. You're not a cookie. It's not what works for one person may not work for you. And there's a reason for that. One person may be able to do this, just do online, and that's who they are, but it's not who you are. Something's not working. There's a reason. There's an absolute reason for it. And you can find that and figure it out. And it has to do with taking who you are on a soul level, what you're experiencing in the here now, and marrying those two.
Okay. Wow. That is fascinating stuff. I love it so much. I could ask you questions all day about it, but
of course, can't we all?
Right?
Yeah.
But we're kind of coming to the end here. So before every interview ends, I always like to ask a few sort of random questions that just to get to know you better. So the first one, I always ask, if you could have dinner with anybody in the world, alive or dead, who would you pick?
This is crazy. What popped in my head, I knew you were the end of the question was going to be, and it would be Fred Astaire.
Fred Astaire. Oh, that's
when I was young, I loved Fred Astaire movies. I just thought I wanted to be like a Ginger Rogers. It was just, he was so suave and debonair and just, yeah.
That's a great answer. I love that answer.
Crazy, but that's what popped in my head. So
okay, awesome. And then here's another one. If you had the opportunity to go to space and walk on the moon, would you take it?
No.
Yeah, me either. I don't believe
I'm claustrophobic. I couldn't do
it. Yeah, I'll stay right here on the ground. And then the last one is, what book has mostly inspired you, either business or fiction?
That's easy, A Course in Miracles.
Okay, so that's actually a book that has a course along with it, a process. Yeah. All right.
The book. It has pages. It has 365 lessons. You do a lesson a day. It's got it's called Workbook for Students, and it's got a teacher manual. Basically, it's like a Bible because you study it your entire life.
Yeah.
It's not like your typical, it's not like a typical course when you think of a course.
Yeah.
It's written in a very Shakespearean style, so you really have to think about it. So it's best to study it with someone, with a group, that kind of thing. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Wow. So are there groups that people can find that study that book?
Oh, there's plenty. Yeah, there's a lot.
So somebody could look online and find that if they
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And so Sharon, what's next for you? Do you have any big plans coming out, big launches or big speeches anywhere going on?
Not really. I just kind of this is my year of travel. I just got back from Hawaii. Before that, I went to Spain, and then my daughter-in-law is from the country of Georgia, so I'm going to Georgia in July.
Oh, that's what you meant.
I'm so excited because
when you said you were stopping in London, I was like, wait, that's not really on the way from Georgia.
Yeah, well, my son lives in London, so I'll say that on here. So I love that. He lived in Australia for 7 years, and it was so far away. So I love London's closer, and I love London,
Yeah.
And I must have spent many lifetimes there because I feel so comfortable there.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I bet you did. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, so I am going to put together, I haven't started it yet, but this is encouraging to go ahead and do it. But I am going to put together something, whether it's just a little small free class or whatever, on how the Akashic Records and A Course in Miracles work together.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I do,
All right.
Well, and I'll post that on, like my Facebook or, on my website or, LinkedIn. I do all of those.
You have a free gift for my audience, correct?
I do. If you go to my website, SharonHess.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a guide called Heal Your Money Wounds. And it's a really good one. So I think most people would like it.
Okay, great. And then, like you said, people can find you on Facebook, LinkedIn, and SharonHess.com, correct?
Correct. Oh, and I forgot, there's also, if they want to go to moreclients.info, they'll get a little view into a spiritual sales process.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'll make sure I include that, of course, in all the show notes, but that's probably going to be really helpful for a lot of people. So I'll
Yeah,
check.
especially business people. Now, the whole thing is if you're a business person, you're still a person. So your spiritual path and your spiritual journey is a part of who you are. So you really need to nurture both of those things. You need to nurture your business. We have to do things.
Yeah.
We have to market, we have to do things like this, we have to network, we have to do all
Yep.
the businessy stuff. But you also have to, nurture your spiritual self, because the two work together.
Yeah.
Trust
And
me.
the more I hear it from you, like it just seems like the more in tune you are, the better positioning you can be to succeed.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I love that. I'm so glad you came to talk to us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, Sharon, take care.